Okay, I'd like a motion to call this special meeting to order. May I have a motion? Okay, Tom and Jack, it looks like. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, and I need to appoint a clerk pro tem, of which I would like to have a motion that I appoint Roy in that position. May I have a motion? It looks like Jack and John. Everybody, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Roy, you're now the clerk pro tem.
Thank you so much. I accept that nomination on behalf. Thank you.
I'd like to thank my everybody around me. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and move into the item we have, which is the grant from the foundation. And Mr. Carlin, I'm assuming you'll walk us through this very gracious grant.
Yes, make sure. Can you hear me? Am I on mute?
Nope. Yep, no, we can hear you.
Now.
Great. We have 3 off-cycle grants that were approved by the foundation. Looks like they're all kind of media technology related. We have a portable podcast studio for $4,000, audio systems for the elementary school. That's probably more COVID related, so people can be heard in the classroom with masks on.
Oh.
And also cable channel for Bronxville School District. Those totals $73,000, and we are very, very grateful to the foundation for this kind of support.
I would just add, Dan, the audio systems are not only for COVID, although they'll help tremendously during the COVID because kids are behind the shields, but beyond COVID, once they all come down, it'll help tremendously for any child to hear teacher from any part of the room. We have a number of classrooms already who have the systems, and this will fill the rest of the elementary classes, so they're all on equal terms there.
Great.
So Roy, is it actually, it's miking the teacher?
Yeah. Yep.
And then putting speakers around the rooms? Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
That's really great.
Yeah, it really is nice. Helps tremendously, especially now.
And that puts all of the classrooms in the elementary on the same page,
Correct.
On the same level, if you will.
Correct.
Do we have a need in the middle school and high school, or is that less of an issue?
I don't know, maybe the years are better there. I don't really know. It hasn't come up there as much, but eventually we can look into that as well. In certain situations where it makes sense, I think we have some, but right now I think we're good.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Any discussion from the board? Okay, I'll take a motion to approve with great gratitude the grants.
So
I see John and Tom Evans. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. No opposed.
Okay.
So Roy, do we need a motion to move out of public?
Yeah. So we're going to ask for a motion to move into executive session. I would just ask the board members. I did send you a separate link to go into the exec session. So we're going to have to actually sign off this one and go on to the other Zoom link. Brian, you'll keep this link open because once we finish the exec session, I'm not sure how long that will take exactly, perhaps 15 minutes. I really don't know. We'll come back out to the public session, close the public session, and go into our budget workshop on the channel that we're on now.
Right. So we'll return to.
Go ahead, Arlene.
I was going to say, well, we will return to this Zoom link after we do the executive session.
Yes. Correct. And Brian, if you can make me a co-host when we get back, then I can just pop up the slides.
Yes, you're co-host, you and Roy, so you guys can just join back.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, but we do need a motion to move into executive session, correct?
Yep.
Okay, I see Tom's hand and I see Jack's hand. And all in favor, just raise your hand since you're all on mute. No opposed. I'll see you in a moment on the other link.
Okay.
Okay, Roy, do we need a motion to move us back into executive session? I mean, move us back into
So
Public,
we're just, it's just, formal action, just a call to reconvene. That's all.
okay. Jack. Were you approving?
I was making the motion,
Oh, okay. We're reconvening back into the workshop.
whatever
And with that-
motion you need.
Okay.
Arlene, all you're going to do is you're going to adjourn this meeting and then we're going to go
Okay.
right into the public. So Jack will make the motion to adjourn the meeting and we'll go into the budget workshop.
Okay, so Jack is, and Jen, can I ask you to second, please? Thank you. And we'll move right into the workshop. And with that, Dan, and by the way, I love your new glasses. Over to you. You're on, there you go.
Thank you very much. As we sit here today, we've done a lot of work on this budget. It's gone in a few different directions. The board has asked us to come back with a recommendation for how we can get to the cap. And we've done that. And so I'm going to share my screen and put that up here so I can explain where we are. From the beginning. That's not the beginning. Okay. So we're towards the end of the process. We need to adopt a budget in either March or April. The last few years, we've targeted the March meeting, and I think we're still on course for that. I think coming out of the last workshop, a board member had asked to, take a look at where our budget has gone over the last 5 or 6 years. So I traced back 5 or 6 years, and you can see where the growth in the budget has been. Salaries is kind of on target with CPI over that period of time. Health insurance has obviously been far greater than the CPI. Contractual codes have grown, and BOCES codes have grown. And to a lesser extent, special ed tuition and some equipment lines. And let me show where that explanations for that growth. Salaries, staffing has been relatively flat over that period of time. So wage growth, growth in wages is directly related to contract settlements and has pretty much tracked CPI over that period of time. The ERS and TRS rates were much higher at the time, so it shows a significant reduction. Health insurance has grown at roughly 5% a year, which actually is less than health insurance trend over that period of time. Generally, I think the consortium that we take part in has done a good job of controlling costs. Contractual expenditures, most of that growth has come in security, cleaning, private school transportation, and also some staff development.
Dan, do you know how much the private school transportation has grown in the 5-year period specifically?
I would say probably $150,000 or so.
From what to what do you think? 600 to 750?
I think right now it's about 750, so it was probably around 600 back then, 550, 600. And a lot of that has to do with ridership. Our ridership over that period of time is probably up over 20-25%.
So Dan, do you want us to talk about these as you go through them, or do you want us to wait until the end? Just because I think we all have a lot of questions.
If you have questions, fire them out there.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we talked about transportation specifically was trying to tighten up the process so people were opting out. What's been the current thinking on that issue?
Well, we're in the process of taking applications for next year. The deadline is April 1st. And I think once those applications come in, we will compare, because we do keep track of who rides. We'll compare those applications with who actually rides. And, I may contact them directly and say, look, you have an application in here, but you didn't send anybody on the bus last year. in a lot of cases, not in all cases, but in some cases, that would help us if that person would withdraw that application. If it's all Bronxville riders on a certain route, we're still paying for that no matter what. If one application is withdrawn or a couple of applications are withdrawn, it would just, the cost for the other riders would just go up. But if we're sharing that route with Eastchester, Pelham, or Tuckahoe, then that would, the Bronxville share of that route would go down. So that's my plan going into next year.
But your budget for next year though includes 100% of,
Yeah,
it doesn't include any of those benefits we'll get.
They're legally entitled to that transportation.
And there's no incentive for them to say, I mean, it's a free option, right?
Exactly.
Correct.
Exactly. The way it's going to work out is we'd be asking them to do us a favor.
Well, I know, I appreciate the politicalness of your statement you just made. The other thing to think about is this is on the agenda for, I think it's the Westchester Putnam School Board Association to change the parameters, or to lobby to change the parameters. And I just throw that out to the board because this seemed to be one item that we might want to, if we wanted to get more vocal and grassroots efforts, this might be one of them for us. Because Dan and I had a conversation of how much it would save us if they dropped it from, I think it was 15 miles to 5.
Is that the proposal, Arlene?
That is the lobbying position of the Westchester Putnam School Board Association. So that's what they're advocating for. And we could jump on that with them if we wanted to.
And this is a statewide thing.
Yeah, this is state law that we're required to transport students to private schools within 15-mile radius. And that's whether or not we transport our own students to school, obviously.
But it's also, the standard isn't bus pickup at your house. The standard is provide transportation, and that should be
correct. And this year we've been forced. It's cost us a little more this year because we can't. We've had to get larger buses that can't navigate some of the Bronxville streets, and that take a longer time. They can't go on the hutch either, just to maintain social distancing requirements. Hopefully next year we'll be back to vans, and that'll be a more efficient. Because I've been working with parents. We've had a lot of complaints on the timing and on some central pickup points. But we don't provide Rolls-Royce service. We probably provide Cadillac service. There are other districts that do the Chevy or the Ford, and just give out public transportation. Take a Beeline bus and walk the rest of the way. We are legally allowed to do that. I think what that is really saying is, if a first grader is going up to Hackley and we're giving a Beeline bus pass, that's realistically saying, parent, you take care of the kid, because I don't think a lot of Bronxville parents would put their first grader on a Beeline bus.
Yeah, look, I don't think you cover it later, but I guess we talked about it once before. I'm not sure doing that is the right way to think about it, but I don't think a free option is the right way to think about it either. And so maybe there's a way to structure it in such a way as to say, we will provide this amount of funding for your student to take the van or whatever that mode of transportation is that we're allowed to offer at this point with COVID, and you pay for the difference. And if you don't want to do that, then don't do it and figure out your transportation on your own. But it's a huge number. And I think when we're looking at balancing budgets and all of the competing needs, we cannot ignore the total dollars involved and what our obligations are to not just those people who are transporting their kids to private schools, but to the other 95% of the students who are in the school in Bronxville, and what their families are paying.
I couldn't agree more. It is, I mean, when you look at the number or the things that we actually can control and influence, there's not a lot of them. But this is one that seems ripe for further discussion and, working through it and figuring out a solution.
Could we get a legal opinion on what we can and can't do?
As far as what, Jack?
A bunch of options were just thrown out, and I want to make.
We can't charge
No,
parents.
I'd actually like a legal opinion.
Sure.
Thanks.
I have that. I'll forward that.
Like,
Great.
for example, John's proposal about offering, kind of a split, offering up to a certain dollar amount and then parents paying the remainder. Is that not meeting our obligation to provide transportation?
Exactly.
I'll get a legal opinion on that.
I think John's idea and some similar ideas are well worth considering, but I want to make sure that we can.
And then growth in the BOCES budget has been primarily technology, a little bit of curriculum development and staff development. Their administrative budget has grown, and then some special ed services that are related to specific IEPs. And that brings us to where we are with the 2021-22 proposed budget. At the last board meeting, after factoring in the retirement incentive and savings realized from the retirement incentive budget savings, we went from being over 4% with the tax levy increase to a little over 3%. With a cap of 1.71%, that leaves the budget about $689,000 over the cap. And the board was very direct that they were asking for our recommendations how to get under that cap. And this is what we decided would be to preserve the program that we offer our students at the moment. The best way to do that would be to move forward on focusing on handling our own flood risk versus paying exorbitant market rates for that. If we look at handling our own risk, we could eliminate $400,000 from our current budget. And reasons for moving in this direction are, the new Meadow Avenue connection, which would eliminate the reasons for the 2000 or the last flood that of a few years ago, where we just got a little bit of water coming in from Meadow Avenue. We now run 5 pumps. We haven't had any kind of water coming into the parking lot area now for basically 10 years. And we have adequate reserves, in my opinion, to self-insure a lot of that risk. And then in case of any kind of catastrophic loss, we do maintain bonding power, for emergency. We can bond out any catastrophic loss costs. And if you think about it from the 30,000 foot level looking down, we have an insurance reserve for about $1.5 million. We have other reserves, certainly availing ourselves of millions of dollars as well in case of a catastrophic loss. And then getting up to the level of the 2011 loss, which was between 7 and 8 million. If we can handle the first 3 million or so out of current reserves, and then bond out the rest, which would be about $4 million, that's really 10 years worth of premiums, which is what we'd be paying anyway. So I think it would behoove us to take that risk. And we've been in contact with our insurance consultant. He says the market is getting ridiculous for this kind of catastrophic flood insurance. And he recommends that we take this approach moving forward. And then for the other part, that gets us to within $300,000 of the cap. And then the other part is to tap some of our available reserves that are directed for certain areas, such as increases in the teacher's retirement system and the employer's retirement system contributions. And then offset the delay in receiving building aid temporarily by tapping our tax certiorari reserves. So use $300,000 worth of reserves. And you know, the argument could be made that, boy, this will put us in a tougher spot next year. But in developing this approach, we also realized that the retirement incentive includes payment of the incentive next year for 8 employees, which almost fully offsets this. So it's kind of handling this one-time drawdown of reserves, which we'd be able to offset in the following year's budget when the retirement incentive payment comes out. So we're very cognizant of the position this will put us in for developing the 22-23 budget as well.
Dan,
You also,
question, I'm sorry, about the ERS and the TRS offsets and the reserve releases. Were those drawn because we needed the money to help plug the gap, or did you look at the what I would describe as a normalized level of ERS expense and TRS expense and tried to use the reserves to plug an overage against a normalized level such that, you know, that would be what, in my view, the reserve was designed for?
I would say both, John. You know, it just so happens that the increase in both of these, and also comparing to the level of reserves, you know, if the increase in either one of these, just say it was like $10,000, and I don't want to allocate more than that annual increase is to one area. I want to keep it, you know, kind of smooth. But you know, we really realize that we need $300,000 more to get under the cap. So it just happened to work out that that the approaches were very synchronous.
I guess I should just make my point. The point of those reserves, in my view, is to buffer volatility around what would be a normalized level of increase. And I don't know what those numbers are. I mean, you could look back 10, 15 years and try and figure out what that is. They're not meant to be piggy banks that we raid to support things when we're spending $700,000 on private transportation.
Agreed.
I was hoping we were going to tie this more to our COVID one-time expenditures.
A lot of our COVID one-time expenditures are being handled through the through the foundation. You know, they helped us out a lot with the acrylic desk separators, and then through the maintenance budget in the current year. So we're not seeing, and I don't anticipate COVID expenses for next year nearly as much as we've seen this year as well.
So Dan, when you say that, what I hear is that we're not balancing we are unable to balance our budget based on just our everyday expenses and revenues. That's an interesting way of putting it.
I think we're faced with more challenges this year than we've seen in other years with the reduction on the revenue side. Given this particular year with those revenue challenges, we need a little help.
I would say, Arlene, the other way, if you want to look at it that way, yes, we could, but we would have to make some decisions. For example, previous budget workshop, we said one of the things we could look at was cutting 10% of discretionary spending, supplies, et cetera, that saves about $200,000. So we could certainly do that. We also suggested that if we had to, we would cut an elementary school teaching position at some level, right? That's the other way to do that. Now there are obviously there's an impact to doing making those decisions potentially. And again, we don't have kindergarten numbers yet, so it's relatively hard to predict, but it could result in a little bit higher class size at the elementary school if we were to do that. Doesn't mean we can't, but that's the impact of that. Same thing with supplies. Just means we would have less available supplies for people to use in the classroom, which what we're trying to do is prevent any kind of significant changes to program or staffing. But to your point, yeah, if we're not comfortable using reserves for this kind of thing, those are the decisions we would lean towards. Or as John's point earlier, is the transportation. We'd have to take a look at that.
Right, because what I'm as I prepared for this meeting today, I mean, I keep trying, and we talked about this at the last workshop, look out 2 to 3 years, right? Because we really, our job is to start to understand trends.
Sure.
And if our trends are that our revenues, especially, and we're going to be in a political environment for a while, that our revenues are going to be less than our expenses, we need to make some tough decisions.
Sure.
And just like you talked about, and the tax surcharge is definitely one of the things that we've talked about for years that we could always tap into. I was really quite surprised by the ERS and TRS. I just want to make sure that we're not avoiding a difficult conversation.
Yeah, no question about it.
Well,
if you look at it, the ERS TRS reserve, I think we're looking at $150,000 allocation from those reserves. We could come back with a recommendation picking that $150,000 up before we present the budget to everybody. But for the March 23rd meeting, we could come back if the board's not comfortable with that, with taking those reserve accounts down a little bit, or looking at it from a normalized view from what John suggested and saying, okay, on average over the last 10 years, it was X. Next year, it's more than X. So we'll just do that amount and we'll make up the difference from either discretionary spending or transportation.
Okay.
Well, the way I think about this is, there's $500,000 that's creating the issues, $500,000 that we don't expect from the state. That's what we're budgeting. With everything going through at the federal level, the schools are going to get billions of dollars. What we don't know is what New York State does with those billions. That's the issue.
Yeah.
If it was a normal process in a normal state, and a normal process, meaning it goes from the federal government to the state government, they turn around and give it to the schools, I'd feel very comfortable with this. That second step, what the state does with the money, I have no assurance that that's actually going to filter down to the school districts in a rational and quick way. So the way I'm thinking about it, Arlene, is yes, I agree. I don't think we're having the difficult conversation, but I don't think we have to have it quite yet, because I think in a rational, over the next couple of years, most, if not all, that $500,000 come back. And that would, if we think the flood going self-insured is something we want to do, we're covering kind of a one-time or maybe a 2-year issue with some reserves.
So Mike, I'm going to regret the day that I sat on these calls with the Westchester Putnam group, but their read of the politics are that this, as you said it exactly right, that money comes from federal to the state. New York takes it and plays pays Peter to take from Paul, right? And so we actually end up with less money than more money. And
Yeah.
their point was that was going to be that way for a foreseeable future, because the current administration in Albany is very reluctant to send any more money to affluent school districts. And so that was just, I took that away from that meeting, that it is going to be, we're going to be on the hot seat for a while.
Well, that could be, but if there's numbers being thrown all over the place, but the amount of money that the federal government is going to give New York State it's more than the tax loss for this year and next year.
Yeah.
So they're going to have a hard argument to say the schools don't deserve the money that was allocated to them. Now that they could take that money and reallocate it in different ways, what your point is, and that's where I get uncomfortable.
That's what they were saying, is that money was going to go to invest in underserved school districts. So I just shared that.
Yeah.
Those are the
It's a tough
issues that have
situation.
been, those issues have been around for a long time and are going to be around for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the next slide just to give everybody an idea of what we're talking about when we're looking at our reserves. We have a tax surcharge reserve and a reserve for insurance. I mean, those together total almost $3 million. And then we have unassigned fund balance of about 2 million. And those were the, and we could even, in the case of a flood, if there was any, if we needed to use capital project reserves to recover from a flood as well, we could tap that. So in terms of, responding to a flood, I think we are adequately reserved to self-insure. And looking at the TRS and the ERS reserves, we're looking at probably 10% of what the ERS reserve is, and we just started accumulating funding for a TRS reserve, and we're talking about less than half of that. And going back, I mean, you can look at 2016 when we allocated 580,000. That was really when we were trying to get down to a more sustainable level. But going back a few years before that, probably say 2013, 2014, we were at the allocation to reduce to offset the tax levy was actually over $1 million. So I think we're at a much more sustainable level, and we have a plan. If we bump up from 500,000 to 800,000 this year, we have a plan for getting that back to our more natural surplus level of 500,000 the next year, to rebound from that.
I think the key point is not using reserves to pay for likely ongoing expenses.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's what we're struggling with.
Dan, can you remind, there was supposed to be an air pocket in the construction reimbursement, if you will, right? There was a mismatch, and that was hitting us this year, which we would expect to kind of revert, right? A one-time air pocket, right? How much was that number?
That I think it's close to $400,000.
So is it fair to say that you could look at the 800,000 and say, but for the timing mismatch of the construction, well, again, say it's an air pocket or working capital, the number would be closer to 400,000 of a reserve release?
Yeah, they changed policy up at the state where you have to get a final cost report in now before they start sending you your building aid. And we expect to get that in over the summer, so we start to get our building aid on the most recent project next year, and that should be between $300,000 and $400,000 a year.
And we would have gotten that prior to the change in policy. We would have gotten that a year earlier. Is that correct? And
Dan, isn't that
up.
reflected on? I'm sorry, isn't that reflected on the prior slide?
I don't think so.
You say offset delay of building aid.
Yeah, offset delay of building aid. I mean, that's the rationale for,
Eileen, I think that's the plug.
Thank you, John.
there you go, John.
Put it another way, a
Yep.
four-letter word. But I do think it's worth noting that we're trying to make up for you know, a timing gap as well.
Yes.
But John, thank you for going there, because that's where I was headed. If it is indeed the plug, why aren't we just taking it all out of tax surcharge? Because that's the one we know is kind of a reserve that doesn't ever move.
That's why I asked the question about the TRS and ERS.
Yeah,
If there's
exactly.
if there's a normalized rationale for those two,
Right.
I think that's fine. I think if there's a $400,000 construction aid gap we're trying to fill, that we have confidence that we'll catch up on in some time, then we should just list that and say what we're doing.
Yeah, I don't think it matters which reserve we go to. I like spreading it out, you know, just to smooth. You know, I prefer little changes to large changes, but you know, it's obviously all fungible.
And
It
then,
is, but the thinking is not. And I think what the
Exactly.
board is
Yes.
trying to do, Dan, is to set the principle that you don't use money from reserves to pay for ongoing things.
Sure.
and I'll say this one last time and then I'll shut up about it. But like, if we're successful at quote unquote balancing the budget, it's not so much balancing, but it's staying within the cap with the levers that we have in front of us. That doesn't excuse excess spending elsewhere where we've, you know, where we can trim. Just
Sure.
because we can get the taxpayers' money with a 1.7% rate increase
Right.
doesn't mean we should do it. If we can find, if there are appropriate approaches to spending that would save us money elsewhere. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think we meaningfully have to address the transportation issue.
I mean, it's about what you placing your values and your emphasis, and you know, ultimately it's what we're trying to do with the school curriculum and human resources and educational program. So there's a fixed pot of money.
Absolutely.
So just to test the waters, Dan, what I'm hearing is number one, tackle transportation. And number two is use the fund balances or the reserves to the extent that we have a rationale to do so, which would be the offset of the delay of the building aid, all coming out of tax surcharge. Other board members, can we have your thoughts?
Agreed.
Agree.
Yeah.
Can I ask if we're all okay, which we think we are, but make sure we're all okay with the self-insured on the flood side?
Agreed.
Okay.
I guess Roy, on that point, it makes the insurance reserve all the more precious.
Correct.
Yeah, it does.
The insurance reserve was like a pot of money we could go get if we had insurance. But if we don't have insurance, then now we need to put that in a lock, you know, in a box. And remember that.
Nobody
Yeah.
mentioned going after that.
Yep. And build it up when and if we can in the future.
Yeah, that unfortunately is limited
Yeah,
to
right.
3% of the next year's budget. And we max that, we max that out every year. That's the first thing we do when considering reserve policy.
So Dan, remind me, so if there is a flood, the federal government picks up the first $1 million after a small deductible?
Yes, FEMA, I think we have a $10,000 deductible, and then FEMA kicks in covering the first $1 million. Then there is coverage from 1 million to 10 million.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Then
I was gonna say,
we're currently paying for coverage. We're paying over $400,000 a year for coverage from 1 million to 10 million beyond the initial FEMA 1 million. So we still have the FEMA 1 million. And then beyond that, we'd be on our own. And the loss we had when the water came in from the Meadow Avenue side was less than $1 million. And the one back from Hurricane Irene, it was less than 8 million. And that was, you know, we did a lot of mitigation after that one as well, where you know, even if we had 5 feet of water in the building and it was all dark water, you know, I don't think it would be more than, say, 6 or 7 million to recover from that.
Dan, did FEMA
Pump, right?
pre-pump?
That was all pre-pump, yes.
Yeah. And then
And-
FEMA came in with some substantial money at that time too, did they not? At Irene?
FEMA came in with money to move our boiler rooms.
Yeah.
All kinds of money.
Yeah.
And pumps. FEMA came in with money for the pumps as well.
And getting a bigger drain over on Meadow was equally important.
Yes, and that we did with the building. That was the first thing this building project tackled, was getting that line in.
So Dan, what happens if we have a major flood? You get 5 feet of dark water and it is $6 million. Just walk the board through what the school does.
My first call is to a firm called BMS Cat. They're equipped to deal with these industrial floods. I think this predates me, but I think my predecessor, you know, he was looking at minor contractors, and then we had fortunately enough, we had a resident who was very experienced in this kind of recovery. And
so Dan, I apologize. I didn't ask my question well. How do we pay for what I know you will do and do well? How do we pay for that? How do we pay for the $6 million?
If we lost $6 million, that if we had a flood loss of $6 million, FEMA would take the first $1 million. And then we would have to figure out a way to do the next 5. And we have first $1.5 million would be the insurance reserve. That's what it's there for.
Okay.
Then we have $2 million in unassigned fund balance. We have the tax certiorari of $1.5 million, although we're talking about taking that down to $1.2 million at this point. And then we have a construction reserve. You know, you combine all of those, you know, you're getting to the 5 million figure. But even beyond that, if the board decided we don't want to, you know, we don't want to destroy all of our equity.
Right.
We could bond to recover that, and maybe not bond the whole thing, but at current rates, if we just take the premium that we're saving of $400,000 a year, that easily gets us about $3.5 million worth of capital through bonding.
Got it. I just want to make sure we all understand how that rolls out. Thank you.
And in the meantime, until such a time as that happens, which, by the way, we don't think will happen, because the village and FEMA has invested in this plan that took over a decade to complete, with the pumps and the connections and all of that. We don't think it's going to happen. And engineers tell us it's not going to happen. But we are ready for it if it does. But I think it's better us assuming that risk than paying exorbitantly for someone else to.
I just think there's some good communications around this one, Dan.
Sure.
Just because what's not being said is, of course, if the big flood happens, the finger pointing will be severe.
Yeah.
And we're just going to have to take if it does happen.
Yep.
And Dan, you know, when we were in the last budget meeting a couple of weeks ago, we did request maybe for an insurance company, if there was a more extreme flood like this, to just look at kind of catastrophic insurance. Was that just was nothing that really made sense?
We have nothing that makes sense on that yet. No, you know, everybody is declining. to even quote us anything.
Hmm.
But if we do get something, then we can always revisit.
Yeah.
If something makes sense, we don't, we're not excited to lose flood insurance. If there's anything we can do to keep catastrophic insurance, we certainly would. But at reasonable rates.
Yeah.
The market has moved away from us. The
Yeah.
plan that we had to put the pumps in, the pipe, and then get catastrophic insurance isn't working because the market has moved away.
Yeah, though all of that action should have reduced our premium significantly.
Right.
And the exact opposite has happened because the market moved away from us, as Jack said.
Others, questions on the two big issues in front of us, which is basically going self-insured and two, using the reserves?
Arlene, I want to go back to something you were saying some while ago about needing to look at budgets 3 to 5 years down the road.
Yep.
So that we are looking at where this is all headed.
Yeah. I really think that's important. I appreciated the 5 years historical view you gave us, Dan, but I think, especially with everybody's knowledge of, how you're reading the political environment with the schools and up in Albany and the tax cap and teachers being fairly compensated in healthcare, it just seems that there's some really tough issues that we need to be keeping our eyes out 3 to 5 years.
Sure.
So is that, would you do for us some scenario
Absolutely.
planning on that?
Yep.
Okay. I don't think we need it before the March board meeting, but it sure would be nice before we ended up this school year.
No problem. I should be able to get that out next week.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Dan, what else do you need from us today?
I think I have enough. What do you think, Roy?
Yeah, no, I think we're good. Appreciated the discussion very much. I think it was good that everybody had a chance to weigh in on things, but I think we're good. So thank you.
Okay. All right. I think we can just say goodbye, correct, Roy? We don't need
We
to
can.
adjourn or anything, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Enjoy the day.
Yes, you all as well.